Hello and welcome to today's webinar as part of the Circular Economy Week within the Sustainable Business Series Net Zero. It's so good to see so many of you here today to join us for our expert presentations on the circular economy and really how to progress your business through this principle. Today, we'll talk about many different things on circular economy and cover many of the different business relevances. The Sustainable Business Series campaign aims to share best practice, guidance and knowledge to improve business progress to net zero. In about a month's time, as we all know, the UK will host COP26, an international event joined by 197 countries to agree further climate action. As the impacts from climate change worsen, it's likely that further policy, legislative and supportive measures will come out of COP, which will affect businesses. We all know that businesses want to do more on net zero. And through this webinar, we hope that many of the audience can start to achieve that today. We'll hear perspectives from Luciano Batista, Senior Lecturer in Operations Management at Aston Business School. Then we'll hear from Ian Humphreys, Director of Operations at International Synergies. Then from Tim Danson, Associate Director of Sustainability and Climate Change at WSP. And then finally, we'll hear from Ellen Peacock, Senior Policy Officer at the Greater Birmingham Solihull LEP. I'd just like to say as well, delegates will be sent a questionnaire after this session, which will, all of the answers will help us better shape environmental policy and support for next year from both chambers. So just before I do that, I'd like to go through a poll and kick things off. But firstly, I'd just like to thank all of our sponsors that essentially make this campaign so good and also enable us to deliver it without any charge to our members. So thank you to Aston University, Morgan Sindall, University of Birmingham and Arup. So I believe we'll host a short poll in just a moment. But I'd just like to say as well, we do have a series of other events that are involved in this campaign. Next week, we'll hear on perspectives from transport experts on how to progress your business to net zero through transport. And then we'll have one on sustainable business management. And also we'll end with a summit on the 3rd of November, which is in person at Conference Aston. And we'll hear from the likes of Bim Afalami, who's an MP and chair of the all-party parliamentary group for sustainable energy and climate. And then we'll also hear from the Mayor, Andy Street. So I believe any second now, we'll have a short poll that will pop up and I'll just read the questions. So over the past 12 months, this question one, over the past 12 months, has reducing carbon or greenhouse gas emissions become more or less of a priority for your organisation? Number two, has your organisation implemented any measures to reduce greenhouse gas or carbon emissions? And finally, number three, does your organisation have a plan to achieve net zero? So I'll just give all of the audience today 15 to 20 seconds just to answer that, and then we'll hear the results. So I'll just move on to the results now, and we'll see where our audience is at with their net zero journey. So for question one, so reducing carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions has become more of a priority for the vast majority of the audience today. Number two, most of the audience have actually implemented measures to reduce greenhouse gas and carbon emissions. So that's about 60, so about 2/3 of you there, and then about 1/5 of you said you haven't just yet. And then almost half the audience are saying that they do have a plan to achieve net zero, which is very, very encouraging. So I'd just like to move on now after those very insightful results from our audience and really introduce the first speaker. So first we'll hear from Luciano Batista, who'll be talking on what is the circular economy and really talking about how businesses can implement and adapt the circular economy to their business model. So Luciano, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay and you can see my slides. Can you just give
Yes.
a confirmation? Okay.
Yeah,
we
can see the slides and hear you okay.
Yeah. So good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, the Greater Birmingham and Coventry and Warwickshire Chambers of Commerce for the invitation to talk in this event today. And I have been asked to talk about the circular economy. What's the circular economy, and how can businesses implement and adapt circular economy business models? So I'm going to start with a quick introduction about the concept of the circular economy. And I think the best point to start when you talk about circular economy is to compare it with the linear model, yeah, the linear economy, the economy that we are at the moment, yeah. That economy based on the linear model of supply chains. We have inherited this model from the Industrial Revolution, yeah, centuries ago. And the linear model is based on this very simple model. We take raw materials from nature, we process them, yeah, we make goods, and then we sell them so the end consumers can use. And at the end of life, we just dispose them. Yeah. Years ago, we didn't have the pressures on climate change we have at the moment. So things have changed quite a lot over the years. Yeah. And at the moment, we have this climate change pressure to become more sustainable. We have social pressure to become more sustainable. And you have economic pressures as well to become more sustainable. Yeah. So you need to think about changing the paradigm. Yeah. There's a paradigm shift from this linear model, which is no longer sustainable, to a more sustainable model based on circularity. Yeah. We need to take sustainability as a dominant logic for businesses and for production and for consumption as well. So we need to change our systems, yeah, our societal systems to produce and consume goods. Yeah. So the circular model is quite much based on recovering resources back into the economy. That's why it's called circular. It's take, make, use, but recover at the end. Yeah. And also, there is a kind of wider perspective of the resources we can recover. We not just talk about the end of life of products. We are also considering waste generated along the way, yeah, waste and byproduct. Everything now has become a valuable resource that can be used for the generation of secondary raw materials and also energy. So there are lots of opportunities right there, but at the same time, lots of challenges. And businesses, they're kind of becoming very creative in developing business models based on the circularity of resources. Yeah. So this is quite much the concept. I'm going to drill down a little bit about, on these circular approaches here. And we have so many different recovery approaches. They are quite much based on these R approaches. It's about remanufacturing, recycling is the most popular one, refurbishing materials, remanufacture, reuse, recondition, and repair. So there are lots of opportunities, yeah, along the supply chain. As you can see here, the linear supply chain is still there. It's kind of backbone of production systems. Yeah, we have the traditional linear supply chain, but at the end of life of the cycle of products, we can kind of get them back into the supply chain, something that we call closed loop flows within a supply chain. But there is also opportunity to work with other industries across diverse sectors, linking different supply chains. Yeah, it's a kind of forward feeding, yeah, processes. Instead of throwing resources away, yeah, on landfill, we take those resources and feed those resources to other businesses in other sectors, cascading them to be used in other production systems. These are called open flows. Yeah? They're not getting back to the same supply chain, but going forward to other supply chains. So there are lots of opportunities. Of course, there is an augmented complexity of designing supply chains now. And that's from a business perspective, that becomes a challenge, as I can see some of the questions sent to us. We also have to think about the hierarchy of the R's. Yeah, circular economy is not about recycling. Recycling is the most popular form of recovery at the moment. Yeah, to the point that many people think that circular economy is about recycling. Yeah, but it's not. As you can see here in this pyramid, yeah, recycling is quite much at the middle here. It's not actually the most favored option from a circular economy perspective or from a sustainable economy. The very top of the pyramid here, you should think about reducing generation of waste first, reducing the dependence of prime raw materials that we take from nature, especially the non-renewable ones. And also, before recycling, how about think about reusing, before recycling? And if you cannot reuse, try to repair before recycling, yeah? So as we say, we should not recycle what you can repair, and we should not repair what you can use. That's the idea, yeah? And after recycling, there are opportunities for energy generation as well. And the very last resort is the disposal, yeah? So there is kind of hierarchy. I'd like to highlight these interesting premises here of the circular economy as well. For example, when you think about creating circularity, getting products back into the society and into the economy, there is this interesting premise here that the inner circle, the circularity of resources close to the end consumers is better than circularity far from the end consumers. That's because we can avoid, for example, logistics, we can avoid transport, we can avoid reprocessing of materials, yeah? So you can keep goods and resources circulating where the consumers are. So that's the power of inner circles, yeah? And on top of that, the longer the best, yeah? The power of circling longer, yeah? Keeping the circularity going on for as long as possible, close to the end consumer. So that's the idea in terms of more sustainable options out there. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples later on about the business models involved implementing these kind of premises here, okay, this kind of recovery processes and recovery approaches for the circular economy. I would like to start with this recycling. Yeah, recycling is the most popular one. Recycling has been there for many years, well before we started talking about circular economy. Yeah. Why do we have lots of recycling at the moment? It's because we have a legacy. This is a legacy we have to deal. Yeah, businesses have to deal, society have to deal, governments have to deal. Is the legacy of the linear model we have is still predominant. Yeah, so it's generating lots of waste, particularly plastics. Yeah, plastics is a major problem. Although the technology is improving quite a lot in terms of the materials, plastic materials you can recycle, but there is still a large amount of legacy, plastic waste that we inherited from the linear models. Still a problem, but it's a business model. It is a recovery, yeah. Some of this recycling processing, they require lots of energy. So in that sense, if you do the calculations, it might not be that sustainable because of the large amount of water, for example, energy and heat to recycle certain types of materials. But it still is that attempt to generate secondary raw inputs, and it's a business model. And many businesses out there, they do their businesses around recycling options. But I would like to draw the attention to these other business models here. For example, remanufacturing. Yeah, the Caterpillar is a good example I like to use. Remanufacturing is getting the end product back and remanufacturing it to a new state. Yeah, that's almost new state. It's practically new because the warranty the end consumer gets is practically the same. Caterpillar has a good example. They call Cat Remanufacturing, where they develop specific units, plants for remanufacturing the engines from their consumers. So they get the engines back, they remanufacture and they sell it back to the customers with 40% prices, 40% lower than the original price. It's a win-win relationship. Yeah, they have now 9 plants around the world, probably more because this starts a bit old. It's from last year, and created more than 3,000 jobs, yeah, almost 4,000. The interesting thing here is the relationship with the customers. The customers now have a kind of dual role. They are not only end consumers, yeah, but also suppliers. They supply back, yeah, the materials. What is good for the Caterpillar here? They save costs with the supply chain. They save costs with inputs. Yeah, they don't have to input primary sources. It's secondary, yeah, raw materials they use in this process here. Can this cannibalize the main business they have to produce engines? No, it's actually adding value to their customer base. It's about customer retention and developing long-term relationships with customers. Another example, that's an example looking at repairing, the power of repair. The repairing example I got is the one from Fairphone. Fairphone is a modular phone. The concept of this phone is quite much putting emphasis on repairing, make it easy for the end consumers to repair the phone. And by doing that, they keep their product circulating longer where the consumers are. So they're capitalizing on the power of the inner circles and the power of circling longer as well. So it's an interesting model. Of course, they do not have the scale of the major mobile phone producers, but they're still there. They're still working, and they're trying to scale up that business. But it is an example of how a business model can be built along repairability. Yeah. Value in reuse. That's almost at the top of the pyramid here, as you could see before. This is quite much based on the sharing economy. It's about creating collaborative consumption models. Yeah, it's about reusing, yeah, promoting, facilitating the reuse of resources where the end consumers are. Quite a few examples, just to name a few here. We've got AirBNB, yeah, where people, it's a platform. They're capitalizing, creating the platform as a market where end consumers can share their resources, yeah, and make some money at the same time. The Zipcar is another example in terms of sharing cars. Then consumers can put their cars to the Zipcar platform and rent their cars. And interestingly, more recently, Uber has developed a kind of partnership with Zipcar, so people can, for example, rent a Zipcar and drive for Uber. So they're kind of facilitating this kind of shared consumption, collaborative consumption along the sharing economy. And of course, you have more social initiatives there. The Street Bank, yeah, it's a platform where people can share things with other people. Yeah, it's a C2C platform where neighbors can share tools and all the stuff they have. There's one picture here showing someone sharing a garden spade and this sort of thing. So it's a platform. So just to give you a few examples, you have eBay as well, facilitating circularity at end consumption point and etc. This all putting value on reuse, yeah, just make the connection. So just name a few examples. I'm aware of the time. I have 15 minutes only, and I would like to finish my presentation drawing your attention to these two strategists here, two people that are very influential people. Professor Michael Porter from Harvard Business School, he's saying that businesses have to look at sustainability in a very different way. Yeah, actually, sustainability is no longer a trade-off for economic performance. Competitiveness can come from sustainability. Yeah, his narrative and his call now is for companies to try to create value for the businesses and as well as for the society. Of course, the point here is becoming sustainable drives economic gains as well. So it's no longer a trade-off. There are opportunities. There are economic opportunities out there for businesses to become, if they become more sustainable. If they're clever, they become smarter and become more sustainable. And finally, this thought here about business as well from Paul Hawkins, an environmentalist with many interesting books about the nature capital and the green economy and this sort of thing. He's drawing attention, calling us the businesses. Yeah, business is the only mechanism on the planet today powerful enough to produce the changes necessary to reverse global environments and social degradation. So they call for businesses to become more sustainable. And the circular economy premises, and some of the examples we have seen it, they give us some very interesting ideas. So you can, for example, actually create new income streams, new income, yeah, not only income streams, but also saving costs if you implement circularity in our businesses. Yeah, try to capitalize on the benefits of the circular business model. So that's it from me. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Will.
Thanks, Luciano, for the very insightful presentation. There's definitely some key highlights there, and I think it will roll on quite nicely into Ian's presentation that we'll hear in just a moment on, I guess, that need to collaborate with within the supply chain and speak to your I guess, stakeholders about this in more detail. I'd just like to say as well, if anyone does have any questions, please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Ian will be leaving us at 10:50. So if you do have any direct questions for Ian, then please do put them in the Q&A as well. But yeah, Ian, I guess over to you. And yeah, we'll hear about collaborating within the supply chain and the BASIS project.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me and see the slides okay. Yep, yeah. All good? Okay. Obviously, first of all, thank you very much to the Chamber for inviting me along today and giving me the platform to talk about what we do on the BASIS project and how that can relate to circular economy activity within the supply chain. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm just having trouble. There we go. Panic over. Yeah, so what I want to do first of all is just give a brief introduction to who we are, because I'm guessing as we're quite a small organisation, many of you won't have heard of us. So I'll keep this very brief, because obviously this is the bit that normally switches people straight off at the start of a presentation. But in terms of who we are, we're a small privately owned consultancy based in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham, but we do have offices in Belfast and a smaller office in Brussels. If you've heard of the organisation, then that's likely to have been through the NISP programme, which was a government-based project or business support project that ran from about 2005 to 2015 on a national basis. And that was all around resource efficiency. And what I'm going to talk about today is sort of how we bring businesses together across sector or within your supply chain such that one person's waste becomes someone else's valuable resource. So we do delivery at the coalface, working directly with businesses, but we also use the models that we developed in our time delivering NISP in the UK to actually sell those methodologies around the world. So we have similar programs to NISP running in South Africa, in Turkey, in France, in Canada, and we're basically giving them support and allowing them to learn from our mistakes, if you like. So the things that didn't go so great and the things that did go so great, we sort of share that knowledge and also some of the tools and methodologies we developed. Again, we like to think of ourselves as a leader in the space of industrial symbiosis, this idea of matching resources together, and that led to us being invited to present at the G7, or actually host a G7 seminar on industrial symbiosis and resource efficiency here in Birmingham. And then finally, as actually was touched on by Luciano in the last presentation, we also have software products. So we have our own platform where you can actually upload resources and use it within your own organization, within your supply chain, to make wastes any resources more visible and sort of allow the exchange of those more readily. Okay, so why are we doing what we're doing? Obviously, besides paying the mortgage. What I really wanted to do is, because obviously this suite of webinars is around net zero, is just make sure that you understand the context of resource efficiency in respect of delivering net zero carbon emissions. Because that penny does not always drop, particularly with smaller organisations, I think it's fair to say. I now know that when I'm sitting in on webinars with larger nationals, when they're talking about carbon emissions, they are moving more to looking at raw material flows and waste generation as an area that they're focusing on in respect of understanding the carbon footprints and taking measures to reduce those associated carbon emissions. But to give you a bit of context as to why resource efficiency and raw material usage and waste generation is so important in respect of net zero, here's a graphic from the International Resource Panel, which is part of the United Nations, a report that was published in 2020 that sort of shows you, on the best data they had at the time, that the amount of greenhouse gas emissions associated with material use and raw material provision and producing products is actually on increase and significantly in respect of greenhouse gas emissions. So you can see from 1995 to 2015, we've gone from 5 gigatons of CO2 into the atmosphere to 11.5 gigatons. And that in part is due to some of the rapidly expanding economies around the world, such as sort of India and China, but also sort of our own increasing populations and sort of increasing consumerism. This is a graphic that's taken from a financial institution in the States, but again, clearly shows that most of you, I guess, that have been looking at your own net zero journeys are focused in primarily, in the first instance, on your power usage, so your electricity, gas, oil, whatever that might be. And that normally is because, one, it's often technically the easiest to tackle, and also it often delivers not only some significant greenhouse gas emission reductions, but it also normally delivers lots of cost savings on the bottom line because you're using less energy, particularly in the current climate with increasing energy costs. But this graphic shows that actually for most institutions across a wide range of industry and service providers, that scope 3 emissions, so these are the things that sort of contain raw materials, waste generation and business travel, those scope 3 emissions are sort of typically between 60 to 70% of a company's footprint. So again, it shows the importance in your own net zero journey why getting to grips with resource efficiency and moving to more circular models is vitally important. Finally, just to sort of really hammer the message home, this is a slide which is taken from the Centre for Research into Energy Demand Solutions, which is an organisation or a think tank based in out of Oxford University. They essentially looked at a series of resource efficiency models and their ability to deliver greenhouse gas savings. And they said, in fact, resource efficiency and being smarter with your materials has by far and away the greatest evidence-based opportunity to reduce CO2 emissions. Okay, so that's the reason for taking action. Now I want to move on what is this thing called industrial symbiosis? Because I'm guessing for many of you, it's not a phrase that easily trips off the tongue, and it's not something that will be sort of coming up regularly at dinner parties or in conversations with friends. So it's just to quickly explain what the hell is this thing called industrial symbiosis. Well, Luciano, again, has already done part of the job for me, really. So I won't labour on this slide in respect of the circular economy business models. But where industrial symbiosis sits as a tool, or this concept of one person's waste is another person's treasure, is around this sort of idea of looping back, reuse, sort of resource recovery elements of the production cycles that we're all undertaking, or the services that we're providing. So this idea of sort of looking for alternative supplies of raw material, or where you're generating waste and byproducts as part of your processes, I mean, that can be things like waste paper in the bin under the desk, is how you can get that back into productive use rather than it going off to a waste disposal endpoint. And that's where it sits in the circular economy toolkit. Again, we should have taken a bet at the start of this of how many times you were going to see this circular economy slide or this circularity slide across all the presentations today, because I'm guessing that most of us will have some sort of iteration of it. But in terms of industrial symbiosis, again, absolutely right. The economy still is very much based on this linear model of resources coming in at one end and your products and services coming out of the other, alongside some wastes and some byproducts. And what we're trying to do in the world of industrial symbiosis is create matches within our industrial networks. These are often across sector. So you're not working with traditional businesses that you would normally come across in your day-to-day activities, such that your waste becomes someone else's valuable input. And the reason why I think our projects have been so successful is that, although we're starting to shift slightly now, is that when we first started, we very much framed these opportunities as profitable business transactions. So the idea is that we're creating matches such that it's win-win, such that one company saves money on disposal costs and reduces its impact on the environment. The other company is getting a cheaper resource input into its own business. So we very much marketed it on this idea of it making sound business sense, and that it was all about creating positive impacts on the bottom line. And that seemed to have stood as well in respect of the business still being here today. I should say as well, although I'm focusing here on materials today, industrial symbiosis as a methodology can be applied to a wide raft of resources. That includes water, energy, heat, logistics, capacity in respect of empty sort of storage space or space on your site for development. So again, this idea of sort of matching and creating more value from underutilized resources actually covers a wide range of opportunities. So next one is to sort of talk about basis, because although as a traditional consultancy, primarily we go to businesses and look to be paid for our services, for SMEs based in and around the Birmingham area, there actually is a free service which is funded through European or ERDF monies, or the remnants of. So in terms of how we can help you look at circular opportunities, or this idea of waste becoming a valuable resource within your own supply chains, essentially we can give businesses that are based in the GBSLEP area, and if you're not sure what that is, I'll pop up a slide at the end that sort of shows you the geographical area where this free service is available. We can actually work with you and your supply chains to sort of identify these matches or these match potentials, or how you can reduce your waste and turn it into a potential revenue stream. So the way that the Basis project works is we have a team of people that are all industry time served. So, we've all worked at the sharp end of business, so understand the pressures you're under, and can hopefully sort of speak to you in a simple language that is readily understood. But essentially what we'll do, we'll come out, audit the business, and that's not as bad as it sounds. It's just asking a series of questions around what types of waste are you producing, what quantities, what does it mix with, what are the current arrangements for sort of disposing of that waste. So it's normally a sort of very short site walk around, or if because of COVID restrictions that's not possible, it's a telephone call. We'll understand what opportunities you have. We'll then go into the matching process, hopefully find you a partner business that can actually see value in your materials. We'll then help you progress that match to the point where the exchange is physically occurring. And then at the end of that, hopefully you've received some benefits in respect of reducing your environmental impacts and achieving some cost benefits, but also will help you capture the CO2 benefit so you can report that in your own net zero reporting. So we do that through, as I say, one-to-one face-to-face interactions, but also this is a sort of an event or a sort of a service that we've run that is very good, again, in respect of its application to supply chains, where you can bring your own supply chain together in a room for a couple of hour session. And what you see in that picture over there on the right-hand side is what we do is we divide the businesses up into tables of about 10 delegates with a facilitator on each, and we get you to write down on those green slips of paper all the wastes that you're generating. Again, as I say, that can be waste materials, it can be energy, water, logistics. So sort of things that are not being utilized to their fullest within your own organization that you have to exchange. And conversely, we then get you on those sort of yellowy orange slips of paper to write down what are the things that you'd like to procure for your business in a more cost-effective manner. So what are the important things you need to do? You need to allow you to do your day-to-day activity, and what would you like to get more cost beneficial alternatives for. And then what we do is put you in like a bit of a speed dating exercise. So we get you to read out what resources you have, and if anybody wants them on the table, they flag it up. And we sort of go right around the room such that you see everybody's resources in that one session. And from a room of about 30 to 50 organizations, be that cross-sector or within a supply chain, you can generate 300 plus potential matches from that sort of couple of hour facilitated session. So it's very simple, which is its beauty. And again, you walk away with something after 2 hours in respect of opportunities that you can pursue with our help or otherwise. Again, for those that are starting on the journey and not too clear on where to start, we tried to make life easy for you by also producing a little menu card which gives you some ideas of the sorts of things you can do, and you can simply go down, tick that on the bits that you want to actually approach for your own industry or your own business, and we can sort of help and support you through that journey. So the idea is that it doesn't actually put an awful lot on your time. You get some resource, some hands and some brains to use as you will for a 12-hour period funded through that European pot of money. That is available on our website, and I'm happy to also provide that to Will to circulate around the delegates as well post-event. So geographically, as I said, it is quite limited. If you're in one of those areas you can see on the map, then you are eligible for the Preused service. If you're not, then other organisations like Aston University and the University of Wolverhampton, the University of Birmingham offer very similar services that you can tap into and have probably a wider geographical coverage than our own. So don't be despondent if you're not covered in that area. You know, there are other projects out there that can provide help, and funding is going to be around up until the middle of 2023. So give you a quick idea of a couple of case studies. So this I've tried to choose sort of one at either end of the spectrum really in respect of technical complexity, because I appreciate not everybody will have shot blasting dust within their own organisation, and if you're an insurance broker, I'd ask you, why have you got shot blast in your own organisation? But essentially the first one is Pym and Wildsmith. So they're a company based up near Cannock, and in essence what they do is they surface treat bits of metal, cover it in paint and plastic coatings. They shot blast it with a gritty sand material to make the surface ready to take the coating, and that generates a metal-rich sort of sand waste. That was costing them 18 grand a year to get rid of as a hazardous waste. We put them in touch with a foundry, and that foundry can take it, put it into their own smelting processes. They extract the metal, the sand forms a capping material, which then goes off as an aggregate. And that's turned an 18 grand cost into a 5 grand revenue stream. So again, completely understand that's not going to be relevant to a lot of people here on the call today, but hopefully one that you can all visualize. Birmingham Children's Play Care Network are actually just based across the road from us in Birmingham, in the Jewellery Quarter. Essentially what they do is they're looking to take waste items from businesses and sort of provide them out to craft projects with schools and local communities. So we work with a company in Coleshill called Birmingham Telecom. They're taking old desktop phones, because obviously we're all moving to mobiles and sort of IT-based communication routes these days. They'll take the old desktop phones, give them to the Birmingham Children's Play Care Network. They go into play sheds in some underprivileged areas around Birmingham and beyond, and the kids use them as play items. So again, it's sort of repurposing them, but making sure they're not disposed of. Okay, so hopefully from what I've said, you can see how that sort of methodology can be applied to the supply chain, but a couple of specific examples in the supply chain just to finish off. First is a project that we were awarded through Ofwat, which is working with United Utilities and Severn Trent. But essentially the work we're doing here is we're providing them with a bespoke version of our Synergy platform. So this is this thing that's a bit like eBay for wastes. So the idea is that they can, now they've quantified all the waste within their business, which is the first step, they can upload them onto this system and make them visible across the entirety of the organization. The idea is by making them more visible and having a degree of facilitation, they can create links across projects and also down through the supply chain, such that any waste arisings or overstocks or redundant items can actually be reused by others within the organization. So, as I say, the first port of call from a commercial perspective is what can be done within United Utilities itself. Then as a second port of call, it's what can be done between United Utilities and its supply chain. And then as a third port of call, it's actually what can be done with potential donations out to charity in the local community. And that's something that, this is a project very similar to one we're also currently undertaking with Balfour Beatty Vinci on the HS2 project, about giving them a platform, making resources more visible and facilitating these exchanges. We're also running workshops that I've just described with their supply chain as well. So that's just an example of where that's being used in action. And then finally, this is not one that International Synergies was involved with direct, but actually is one from my own work experience, my own working life, as I worked with British Sugar before I joined International Synergies. But we were pioneers really in industrial symbiosis, but I just didn't know it at the time. And back in the 90s, British Sugar basically had a light bulb moment in respect of thinking about its byproducts and its wastes as potential new revenue streams because of some of the constraints around how it could sell sugar. So it set up a new department, a new business unit called Co-Products. And again, this was all done in collaboration with the supply chain, because as you imagine, making sugar, it's very well linked into the agricultural sector. So again, what we were doing is that sugar beet was delivered into the factory, and again, through links in the supply chain, we were backloading with things like lime material and lime waste coming out of the process to allow them to apply that as a soil conditioner. Again, some of the fiber material that was coming out of the sugar making process, that's again sold back to farmers as an animal feedstock. So understanding what the agricultural sector needed in respect of inputs and how those wastes and byproducts from the process could be positioned and even reprocessed to make them viable as an input into that sector was a huge piece of work, but has stood the company very well, and it was class leading in respect of that supply chain collaboration and turning a lot of its waste materials into significant new revenue streams. So just that's the final sales pitch, is to say, again, anything you've seen of interest there, just be of the mind that if you're in the Greater Birmingham Solihull area, there is some free support you can tap into, and we'll be delighted to talk to you about how we can help you with greening your own supply chain and your own journey towards net zero. And as I say, collaboration absolutely is key. You're not going to do this journey alone. Working with the supply chain, working with businesses across sector and within your own sector is actually key to delivering net zero. Okay, thanks very much, Will.
Thanks, Ian. And yeah, definitely touched on a fair few things there. And I really like the example of British Sugar at the end, which really, I guess, closed it all in with actually the resources, you know, they're using the heat, water, and also materials in the process as well. And to any of the audience today, I would definitely urge anyone to get into contact with Ian around the BASIS project, and even some of the workshops that they're hosting on the circular economy, is they're very good opportunity to get involved with and really, you know, create that framework and supply chain collaboration. So if anyone is interested, please do get in touch, and I can link you in with Ian. I'm sure that'll be okay. And so next, I think we'll hear from Tim Danson, who is the Associate Director at WSP for Sustainability and Climate Change. And he'll talk a bit about the built environment and circular economy. So Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Will. Can you just confirm that you can see my slide and you can hear me okay? Yeah, definitely. Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks to Luciano and to Ian for really good presentations. In fact, they've teed me up very nicely for what I'm going to discuss today, which is around applying circularity in the built environment. Now, if you don't know who WSP is, and if I can get my slide to move on, completely different again. So a really different perspective, I think, from Luciano's and Ian's. We are a global consultancy player, 40,000 globally, 7,000 in the UK, and we design civil infrastructure and buildings. So we provide a lot of advice around property, buildings, railways, highways, bridges, energy, etc., etc. So very different, but as I go through today, hopefully I'm really re-emphasizing that the principles of circularity, being systemic and systematic about taking an approach towards a circular future, can be applied at all levels, not just this level, but at a local level as well. So what I'm going to look at today, very briefly, just re-emphasizing what Ian and Luciano have said around the circular economy and its relationship with climate around net zero. There's a single slide on that. Looking at the market in general, particularly around construction materials too, and the funding opportunities. I know we're going to hear from Ellen in a bit around specific funding opportunities in the West Midlands, which is really great. Go through the principles that we apply in the built environment and just a little bit on how well those applied and where there are opportunities for improvement and innovation. And then I thought it'd be good to look at some really big projects. HS2 Curzon Street Station, which is obviously at the heart of Birmingham, which we've been working on for the last 2 years, and another HS2 case study as well. And again, whilst they are huge mega projects, the principles of what we've achieved there, I think can be applied at any scale. And then very briefly, I'd like to look at what we expect next in the industry. And there's a stuff around guidance and standards, which are going to help organisations of all sizes implying circular economy. So let's get into it. Just again, re-emphasising what has been said, a huge opportunity as part of our net zero journey is the circularity or the circular economy. And you can see there from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and its delivery partners in their various reports, up to 45% of the challenge of net zero lies in how we manage materials. In fact, if we can double our circularity approaches, that gets us on the pathway to below 2-degree world by 2032, which is what we're really all aiming for. In terms of the market for circularity, and this isn't specific necessarily to the built environment, the blue text on the bottom left is, there is a huge opportunity across the globe and the EU, hundreds and billions of euros worth of work and opportunity. I'm sure if any of you work in the construction environment, you won't have failed to notice the fact that the availability and security of materials and the price of construction materials is starting to be squeezed, partly as part of COVID, partly as materials become less available. So we're starting to feel the effects of it. In terms of funding over the last 2 years, and as I said, Ellen will touch on this more regionally in a bit, I'm sure, we see a huge number of organisations from GLA to the Welsh Government, and in fact, West Midlands Combined Authority in the last few weeks, giving out funds and money to those who are going to be taking circularity, driving that forward as part of their journey. And the WMCA one there was specifically for manufacturers, builds on what Luciano and Ian were saying, around real focus on the manufacturing environment. So lots more opportunity coming forward for funding and for actual business growth here. Now, when we in the built environment, we push forward circularity, we take the principles that Luciano and Ian have sort of described, and we try to apply those. And what I've done is I've just set them out here, and I'm not going to go into detail on all of these, we don't have time. But what I've done is I've set them out in the order that I think that they are applied currently within the built environment. And it's a little bit of a broad brush, but going from the top where we apply these things really effectively, right down to the bottom where there's actually much more opportunity for these to be applied. So lean design and continual improvement, that's something that we do in the built environment as a natural part of cost reduction. It's a natural part of how we design our projects. Design for sustainable resource management, that's reducing the waste hierarchy that Luciano showed. And then we go down into some of the more complicated things, some of the things which perhaps aren't as well known about and aren't as well applied. Industrial symbiosis, you know, Ian has talked about the importance of that, but the fact there's still much more to do there. But also the sort of the durability, the flexibility, the demountability, deconstructibility of the assets that we produce in the built environment. Are we really designing them so that we can reuse them at their end of life? Can we use buildings as material banks. And then at the bottom there, the servitization. How do we lease things, hire things, use products as a service, rather than actually just spend capital on them? And then the digitalization is sort of the overlay. So still lots to be done, but those are the principles we work to, and I'm sure when the slides get sent out, you can refer back to those and ask yourself and your clients and your colleagues, are we doing as much as we can against each of these? We do a huge amount of work with different clients, and don't worry about the detail on this. I know it's very small writing, but just to re-emphasize that whilst we will be looking at sort of mega projects in terms of HS2, we work with local governments on specific projects for new buildings and for park recreation. We're doing a lot of work about integrated plastics in asphalt. And we do that across the whole life cycle. So not just from the strategic and sort of design stage, but in terms of operation and end of life as well. So there is lots going on, and it just really just shows you the breadth of people that are organizations that are taking on the circularity challenge. Now, I thought it'd be really interesting just to on HS2 Birmingham, Curzon Street. Obviously, well, I've been working on this project now for nearly 3 years as the Environment Sustainability Lead, but also the Lead for Circularity and Resource Management. It is a huge project, a multi-million pound project. And whatever your feelings about HS2, I'm not here to convince you otherwise. It is pushing the boundaries of what we're trying to deliver in terms of sustainability and circularity. So I thought I'd just show you what we've been applying on this particular project, and then show you how HS2 has actually advanced their thinking and how they're approaching circularity in a different project, in a different location. So let's just have a look at a single slide on that. So for this particular project, there was a great focus on BREEAM, and that is an industry standard, a certification, which allows you to demonstrably show that you have taken certain steps to drive forward resource efficiency, waste efficiency, and how you've designed things that are functionally adaptable, so you can change buildings over their lifetime to adapt to different needs. We hosted a number of sustainability and resource management workshops and identified through that almost 40 resource efficiency ideas, which we have been implemented in the scheme. Something which we spent a lot of time on as well was a design for deconstruction plan. This building has to last, this railway station has to last for 120 years. How, over its lifetime, within that and at the end of life, can it be deconstructed so that we can reuse those materials? And we also applied something quite innovative, which was HS2's material efficiency metric. And that is a formula which calculates how efficiently you're using materials over the life of that asset. And we did that on an individual material basis, really specific stuff, lots of calculations to demonstrate that we've made improvements compared to our baseline. And you can see on the right-hand side there, I can't quite see mine, oh, there we are. We actually demonstrated a 36% improvement in material efficiency by applying that. And actually by adopting those resource efficiency and low carbon measures, we're able to reduce carbon by 87 million kilograms over the life cycle of the scheme, which is a 55% reduction. So some really good gains that we made on that particular project. And actually, it didn't cost and take too much time to actually do these things, but we did have to have the things in place to allow us to do that. And that was things like the life cycle assessment tools and the spreadsheets and the knowledge to be able to take those materials and calculate the savings associated. So that was HS2 Curzon Street Station. Now, HS2 hasn't stood still. And this is another project that we're working on, not in the Birmingham area, unfortunately, down near Steeple Claydon, which is halfway between Birmingham and London. But this project, it's an infrastructure maintenance depot. It's where HS2 is going to maintain and train people on how to maintain their assets, so railway lines and also trains. And the client HS2 has really ramped up in their contractual conditions what they want to see from us delivering on this project. So there's a huge focus in the contract about how we design things that are going to be fit for purpose across the life cycle of the scheme. They also, oh dear, excuse me, not too far. So all of the MEP, all the flooring, all the buildings are going to be designed for reuse. There's a huge contractual focus on how things have to be modular, how we'll have to be able to demount them across their lives. Different assets can be used. And you can see on screen there that this sort of kit of parts, this Lego construction, where pieces can come and go across their life cycle. So they can be reused and reconditioned and repurposed. One of the conditions that was applied on us, that at least one of the building has to be made out of preused steel. And also the main administration building on site has to be preused steel and or timber. And we did a lot of work to demonstrate that actually that they were the right solutions to take in terms of carbon. And you can see here the graph. Where we use preused steel as opposed to traditional steel, the carbon footprint is hugely smaller. And in fact, where we integrate preused steel and timber, that only goes up slightly, but those are the two preferred options. So again, whilst this is a mega project, the client is really driving and pushing us to think in a circular way. So very briefly, and I've just come up to 12 minutes, Will, so hopefully keeping you on time. I'll finish just before the 15-minute mark. 2 slides on what we expect next in the industry. We're seeing a huge amount of guidance and standard and policy on the circular economy. The Mayor of London has recently, in the last year or so, put out some guidance requiring organisations to develop circular economy statements as part of developments in the London area. West Midlands just produced its circular economy route map. You can dig into that and have a look at that and see what their commitments are and how to drive forward things in that region. We're seeing things like UK GBC, which is the Green Building Council, and British Standards, all producing really good documents to help organisations drive forward circularity. We're also currently working with the ISO standards, and probably in the next year and a half, there will be some brand new international standard organisation standards, which will help all organisations frame circularity, understand what they need to consider in quite some detail, and help them apply them. We're also seeing a real growth in metrics and indicators and actually measuring circularity. Now, I'm not going to advocate one or more of these. We've already talked about the HS2 material efficiency metric, but there are a number of products out there which help organisations articulate how they are being circular, and we expect to see it more and more of that coming forward. So, my last slide. Really an advancing market and recognition for the need for funding across all levels, from SMEs right to multinationals. Circular economy market, I think, is behind net zero, but it is gaining huge momentum, and rightly so for all the reasons that we've seen. And there's a significant need to drive circularity on all projects, all organisation levels. And as Ian and Luciano said, the need for cross collaboration is really significant as well. There is stuff coming, there is more funding, more standards, more guidance available, and it's getting into those, really understanding the key concepts. But that's it. A very, very rapid overview of a built environment perspective on things, but hopefully useful and pointing in the direction of a few exemplar products and projects.
Thanks, Tim, and definitely well done there on simplifying a lot of the stuff around the built environment and the circular economy. I know it can be quite complex if you let it, and there was almost like a little checklist in there for circular economy in the built environment with those list of principles to go down. And then also, interestingly, you know, the modular themes coming up. Luciano spoke earlier about the Fairphone, didn't he, and how they had a modular design there. So that's definitely something to consider for anyone who's looking to implement these principles. And yeah, no, Tim briefly mentioned the Combined Authority Fund, and next we'll hear from Ellen Peacock, who will speak on the Low Carbon and Circular Economy Fund. And it is a new fund, and I do know that it is closing soon. So yeah, please do rush to get it, and I'm sure Ellen will enlighten us with what that fund's about and really how it can benefit businesses. So Ellen, over to you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. So yeah, thanks for allowing me to present. As you say, it follow on quite nicely from the previous discussions. Just to clarify the fund, well, I'll come on to it, but the fund I'm going to talk about is the Greater Birmingham Solihull-LEP fund rather than the Combined Authority fund, but they do link across very nicely. So I'll firstly just explain a little bit about what the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership is, because I'm sure not everyone knows. But it's one of 39 local enterprise partnerships set up by government to drive forward economic development in the region, so in England. Our board is made up of representatives from the public and private sectors, in addition to skills providers as well. And it's all about spurring on economic growth in the region. So at the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership, we have policy sector leads for the low carbon and food and drink manufacturing sectors, amongst other sectors as well. These are considered growth areas for the West Midlands, and our work reaches beyond our geographies for this particular work. So there's a map there, you probably can't see it very well, but we cover Coventry and Warwickshire LEP and the Black Country LEP for this particular piece of work. So just to explain a bit more about food and drink manufacturing. So food and drink manufacturing is the manufacture of food and drink products. The principal role of manufacturing in the UK supply chain is to add value to food product ingredients. The food and drink industry is the largest manufacturing sector in the UK, although it's often forgotten about as a manufacturing sector, as it ties so closely with various other sectors as well. The West Midlands food and drink manufacturing sector accounts for about 1 billion GBA across the West Midlands, and the sector employs around 16,000 people across the 3 West Midlands LEPs. And as with the whole country, the sector is dominated by SMEs, with a few larger companies in the region, such as Cadbury is probably one of the most famous ones. All activity, the delivery plan is guided by our Food and Drink Manufacturing Forum. This was set up in 2020 and is made up of 12 businesses. The forum meets quarterly and is focused on gaining sector insight and feedback on sector policy proposals. And it's open to new businesses at the moment if you are interested, or if you are a food and drink manufacturer and want to find out more. I'll also say a little bit about the low carbon sector in the region. So the low carbon sector action plan defines low carbon technology sector as businesses who provide solutions and services necessary to support the transition to a low carbon economy. It incorporates a large proportion of the energy system, which is leading on the low carbon transition, and increasing proportions of the transport, automotive and construction and housing sectors. There are 740 enterprises across the region, and the sector contributes about 3 million GBA to the West Midlands area and around 22,000 jobs. So a big part of our work at the LEP is looking at the long-term challenges and opportunities in our region and creating interventions to respond to this. Sustainability and the circular economy have been identified as key challenges for the region. So growth is important, however, we're keen to ensure that our growth is sustainable, and we need to support businesses in accessing support around the circular economy, waste and resource management, and associated benefits and drawbacks if we're to allow this to happen. So I'll come on to the fund that was mentioned before. So this is why I've recently launched the West Midlands Low Carbon and Circular Economy Fund. There are 8 grants funds available through the fund for partnership bids, so it needs to be a business and another partner, all around the themes of food waste, decarbonisation, sustainable packaging and low carbon in general. The fund won't cover capital, but it will cover the exploration of ideas, and that's sort of the premise behind the fund, is all around unlocking innovation and sort of de-risking innovation somewhat in the sort of pursuit of a circular economy. So you could, for example, look at research or a feasibility study. And so in the context of Brexit and COVID, this is obviously particularly important as businesses have sort of more limited resource to look at this sort of exploration of new ideas. All the information can be found on our website, so please don't hesitate to get in touch with any questions. The fund closes on the 22nd of October, which I think is next Friday. So obviously make sure that you get your application in before that deadline. Another key function of our local enterprise partnership is business support. So this will provide support with applications for the fund. This can be found through our Growth Hub. We also offer support through our Growth Hub on strategic grant funding, student development, recruiting, skills, There's a whole raft of different support that can be offered, and we have specialist account managers as well who can look after sort of specific sectors and help with fund applications, including the Low Carbon and Circular Economy Fund, but other funds as well. So that's it from me. Hopefully it was short and sweet. Do get in touch if you have any questions, and just a reminder that that fund that I previously talked about, the Low Carbon and Circular Economy Fund, closes on the 22nd. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen, and definitely a very useful fund for many businesses in the area, and thank you for sharing that. So I'd just like to say as well, if anyone else does have questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat Q&A function at the end. Also, we will be circulating a questionnaire at the end of the session, just to help us inform our sustainability related activity for the coming year across both the Coventry and Warwickshire, but also the Greater Birmingham Chambers as well. So now we'll just feature a short Q&A. I'm just conscious of time, so we'll only have time for a few questions today. But I'd just like to kick things off really and ask the panel. So at the moment, we're having quite a lot of inflationary pressures from businesses, and they're facing a lot of supply chain difficulties at the moment in a post-pandemic world, and of course because of Brexit. So is there, I guess, opportunity for the circular economy to be used in a post-Brexit world? And I guess, would anyone like to explore the advantages of that for businesses? I know some of them have been touched on through presentations, but I don't know if anyone would like to kick things off there.
If I can start, I think the COVID pandemic showed that how fragile supply chains are, yeah, and the dependence of long supply chains is a dangerous situation for any business. So I think the circular economy provides an opportunity for businesses to review their supply chain and what kind of suppliers they work with and where they are in the world, looking for example, short supply chains, minimizing dependence of long lead times and navigation and transport. So there is opportunity if you reconsider the use of secondary materials, secondary sources. Of course, if it's possible, you need to reassess your production, reassess design. So it's an opportunity for reflection and to review where you can, for example, change the products you offer, and where are your supplies, what kind of secondary raw materials you can use in a kind of more geographical proximity. So I think it's an opportunity for businesses to review their supply chains.
Excellent. Thanks, Luciano. Tim, you've just come off mute. I'll let you go.
I have. I just want to back up what Luciano said. Absolutely right. We're beyond this point now where we can get away with greenwash. Taking the sustainable approach has to have business benefits. It has to be win-win in the supply chain. And I think for me, it's the collaborative element. It's knowing your neighbours. It's the industrial symbiosis, as Ian phrased it. The key aspect here is learning how to make yourself and your value chains more efficient, but also more robust. Absolutely.
And I'd just like to move on as well, unless any of the other panel would like to come in. But essentially, we've had a question from another audience member today that's essentially on, so businesses are very, I guess, that they take this make, take and waste model, which is, the predominant business model, let's be honest, for a lot of businesses. And we really need to shift them, towards focusing on the opportunities that lie within their business processes to apply the circular economy. I guess, are there any opinions from the panel on what are the best ways to go about that in terms of, creating that framework for change from the make, take, waste model through to the circular economy? I don't know if, you'd like to come in on that.
I would say a good starting place is getting in touch with your local business support providers. I think there's quite a lot out there in terms of support and making those steps and understanding more about what the options are, and probably a bit more than you think. So yeah, get in touch with your local either growth hub or university business support program.
And I think as well, as Luciano has said, you know, it's an opportunity to reevaluate what you do. People on this call will know their businesses better than anybody else. And therefore, the opportunity to reevaluate those, see what is significant and start to work with those to identify what's significant, but also see what you can materially change. You know, some of your big hitting items you may not be able to do anything with at the moment. So getting a materiality assessment, what can we really influence and what's big hitting, is a good starting place as well.
Luciano, I don't know if you'd like to come in there and just back up what Tim and Ellen have said.
Yes, I do agree and endorse what Ellen and Tim said, but also I think for the SMEs mainly, it's quite difficult to change your business. You are good at your business. That's what you have in terms of offer and expertise. But at the same time, I think you have to review how dependent you are on the resources you're getting from your suppliers. And perhaps there are opportunities out there that you haven't seen before. And looking for example, engage with the chamber and the community, with the universities and companies that offer help might give you the opportunity to see that actually there are materials out there that you can use, and also materials that you perhaps are throwing away that can be used by someone else, and that way saving your disposal costs, and also even making some money, some additional income streams. So there are opportunities out there that you might have not seen before. So that's within the industrial symbiosis initiative that Tim mentioned.
And I think it's really important just to follow on from that. Finally, don't underestimate the market value of doing these things and actually qualifying and quantifying what you're doing. You know, these are differentiators, and with a society that's increasingly articulate in these areas, you want to be articulating in a way that they can understand and appreciate that you're doing things that are right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually reading the other day that you know, principles of the circular economy have been around for quite some time. Even Henry Ford, back at the start of last century, used to apparently use the wooden boxes that he got from his suppliers in the panels for the cars that he was making. So very interesting that it's been along for so long, and also, you know, you can use that potentially seen as waste as a resource. So I'd just like to really close today with just saying thank you to the panelists today. You've been absolutely brilliant and very insightful. But also thank you to the audience as well today. It's been a delight having you here, and we've had some really good questions come through as well. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Aston University, Morgan Sindall, University of Birmingham and Arup for making this campaign, for supporting this campaign and ensuring that we can deliver a lot of value to our members for free. And that's all we have time for today, everyone. So thank you so much for joining, and I wish you all a good day. Thank you.